All right, everyone. Welcome back to another Esoterica live stream, kind of Q&A hangout session where I get to, really interact with you guys, and you guys can interact with me, I guess, at least through a chat box and through the screen. But welcome. I'm really glad to be able to get back and do one of these again. I haven't done a Q&A in, I don't know, it's like been over a month. I try to definitely do these at least once a month, but I'm glad that able to find some time today to jump on and chat with everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I've been crazily busy with a bunch of projects and things going on in my life, and so it's amazing how quickly your time can get filled. So I'm really glad to again to be able to jump on here and get on the live stream. But yeah, and also apologies if you can hear a little background noise. The door to the outside door to my office is open just because it's pretty warm today, and closing that door would make it positively stifling in here. So I'm sorry for any background noise you hear, like cars and trucks going down the road. But I will say, speaking of trucks, here comes a giant one. But that's suffice to say, it's been actually a really fun period of time here on the channel. For a while there, I've been really pumping out these almost hour-long giant episodes. And you would be surprised to know this, but I don't start off thinking these episodes are going to be an hour long. I really aim to peg them in somewhere at about 25 minutes, and that never happens. They always end up being at least half an hour long, sometimes more than that. And then these last few with this episode on Paul and this episode on spiritual alchemy and this episode on Thoth, it just spiraled out of control, and they really got to be almost an hour long a piece. So I know that some people like long form content, some people like shorter content. I actually like shorter content myself. I don't tend to watch, um, unless it's something I'm really into. I don't tend to watch a 50-minute YouTube video, but I appreciate everyone who sticks through those long videos. I appreciate that a lot. But that's to say, it was really great to get into the god Thoth, or Thoth, or ever how you want to pronounce it, Tahuti. Although I really wish that people would start pronouncing it with the ejective. At least back in the Old Kingdom, there was an ejective before that short vowel, which we don't know what that short vowel was. But it's funny seeing people correct each other or trying to correct me on the pronunciation of Thoth. And one of the things that I do in that video is talk about the pronunciation changed dramatically over the 5,000 years that that Egyptian was spoken in that region. And so no one has the correct pronunciation because it all depends on when you were in ancient Egypt as to how his name was pronounced. And I'm also fairly confident it depends on where you were in Egypt. We know that Upper and Lower Egypt had very distinct, and all up and down the Nile had very distinct dialects, and you can see that in Coptic. So it's certainly the case that if Coptic has a wide range of distinct dialects, certainly ancient Egyptian did as well. So yeah, but anyway, it was a fun episode to make. What's really surprising about that is that the go-to best book on Thoth is about 100 years old. It's actually over 100 years old, written by Patrick Boylan. And it's amazing that sometimes scholarship really gets updated very quickly, and some things go away, and then some scholarship is just so good that it can last for quite some time. And that Patrick Boylan book on Thoth is fantastic, and there's not been a real monograph since then. So I always tell people, you guys out there, if you want to work in esotericism, there's absolutely a dissertation on Thoth, just totally ready to be written. That's just basically an updated version of the Boylan book. So anyone out there who really wants to dive into Egyptology and wants to write the definitive book on Thoth, that's absolutely a thing you could do at this point. It definitely needs to be updated, but it's still a relatively good text. But what else have we been working on? I got to do the really fun episode on Paul. I've been wanting to make that episode on Paul forever. Paul is such a polarizing character in so many ways that in some ways he becomes the whipping boy for everything wrong with Christianity. Everything that Jesus is the good guy and Paul is the bad guy. And Paul's responsible for perverting the true message of Jesus, and I don't think any of that's true. Actually, I think or at least it's much more complicated than that. And so I really was glad to be able to dive into Paul and really show that Paul had a really strong Jewish mystical origin story, and that really important Jewish mystical origin story may be at the very root of his entire mission to the Gentiles. Which, if that's true, and I think it's very possible, I tend to believe that if it's true, then it dramatically impacted the very course of human evolution, spiritual evolution, all throughout the world. So that's a really, really important point to drive home. But I've never been in a situation where I've especially disliked Paul. I think of him as an incredibly complex character, and appreciating him in his complexity is probably what we should do, not sort of cast him off. I don't know. But yeah, the Paul episode was great, and of course the spiritual alchemy episode that I got to do was also really fantastic. It really is a case that this whole concept of spiritual alchemy, I think, gets really, really misunderstood in the Western world. And again, that's very distinct from the Chinese alchemical tradition and the Indian alchemical tradition, all of which, have various relationships to what we might call spirituality, which is a very modern concept, by the way. Spirituality is a very weird, really 19th century concept in a lot of ways, but it was really great to dive into it. Oh, hi, Philip. I see you there in the chat. Folks, I don't know if you see Philip in the chat. Let's talk religion. Philip, I'm looking forward to hanging out with you. What, in like less than 3 weeks? We're going to, God willing, we're all going to be converging on Amsterdam here in about 3 weeks. And it'll look like Philip and Zevi and some other folks maybe are all going to be hanging out in Amsterdam doing sort of some religion tube hanging out. So looking forward to hanging out with you, Philip. I'm really looking forward to that. But anyway, the spiritual alchemy episode, I've even gotten people like, I don't know, angry at me. I think I heard there's even like response videos to some of my alchemy videos on YouTube where people just really get angry at the fact that I downplay the relevance of spiritual alchemy. But I don't downplay it. It's just not there until a certain point in history. And it was there, of course. I think it was very much there at some level in someone like Zosimus. But again, Zosimus's texts really aren't transmitted into Western Europe. So we can't really say that from Zosimus into the Arabic world, and from the Arabic world, Zosimus is transmitted into the Latin Greek world. That's just not true. It just didn't happen. I mean, I have the largest collection of alchemical works ever published, and Zosimus isn't there because those texts weren't converted into European alchemy. So again, this is just where the historiography of alchemy becomes very complicated, and people often will end up doing a lot of projecting back onto these texts. And also, I think that people just don't read them. I think that's also a function of what's happening. Most people don't read much historical alchemy text, especially the ones that are still in Latin, and that's just a barrier of the fact that most people don't read Latin. But yeah, I would highly recommend. There's a vast library, and you can access them all on archive.org. But it is absolutely the case that these texts are accessible, and again, if you read them, it is really surprising what's there and what's not there. But again, I'm all about covering the true bases of spiritual alchemy. We'll be getting to that Jakob Burma episode at some point soon, sometime this summer. I want to go ahead and do it because I really love Jakob Burma. I really do want to do a big episode on theosophy. But those are the things that those are some of the things we've been covered. Oh, I guess also I got to do that really great episode with Attaché Films with Andy down in New Orleans. That was just a ton of fun. Andy's just a great, great guy. It really was a lot of fun. And also, we didn't mention it in that episode, but I also got to hang out with Carl from InRange. I don't know if you're a fan of firearms YouTube. I don't watch much in terms of firearms YouTube, but I really like Carl from InRange. He's just a great guy. He has great sort of Weltanschauung, and also he's just an expert when it comes to firearms. So it was really great to be able to hang out with. Got to hang out with him and with Andy and those guys. So it's been a fun few weeks, and it's going to be a more fun few weeks coming up. We have an episode on Johann Weyer. I'm really looking forward to making an episode on Johann Weyer and on his Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, the false monarchy of the demons, which of course is the joke actually that becomes kind of the backbone of the Goetia. So be looking for that episode next week. I'm looking for that episode next week. I'm really looking forward to it. Johann Weyer is just a super interesting guy. He's a student of Agrippa. Had a very complex relationship to magic. Had a very complex relationship to witchcraft, and so he's just a really, really fascinating character. In some ways, kind of responsible at some level for the birth of psychiatry, which blessing or a curse, but it's great stuff. Great stuff. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the summer. Looking forward to getting all kinds of stuff done. I'm gonna hang out here for maybe an hour and a half or so. I have a cool book to show you guys, some esoterica show and tell as I try to do on these live streams. And yeah, I want to start taking some questions. I see some super chats have all come in and some other stuff. But yeah, again, this channel is an experiment and crowdfunded education. So your super chats and your super thanks and all the super things are welcome. You can again pick up a shirt over at the merch store. All that stuff is super welcomed and very deeply appreciated to keep the lights on and keep the channel going. So but yeah, without further ado, let me get some questions. I know that there was a question that came in the super chat before everything started about me doing an episode on the Book of Coming Forth by Day, better known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Unfortunately known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead, because that's really ironically named, because it's really not for dead people at all. It's precisely a book for helping people who've transitioned from this life into another life, how to manage that whole business. So in many ways, I hate the fact that it's called the Egyptian Book of the Dead, because nothing is further from the truth. In fact, that's the exact wrong name to call it. So I really wish we would start calling it by its actual Egyptian name, which is the Book of Coming Forth by Day. So yeah, I do want to do an episode on it. In fact, there's sort of a 3-part episode that I want to do on the pyramid text, the coffin texts, and the Book of Coming Forth by Day, and talk about them as sort of the classic idea of the democratization of the afterlife in ancient Egyptian religion, and also the intersection there with Heka. And so really just got to start pronouncing that glottal stop at the end of Heka. Well, assuming that's the correct glottal stop, we don't know. But yeah, I do plan to do a series of episodes on the pyramid text, the coffin text, and eventually the Book of Coming Forth by Day. It's just such a gargantuan text. And also, there's no standard version of the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Every version is slightly different. In fact, they could be tailor-made for you to be put away with you when you passed through this life into the next life. And so every version of the Book of Coming Forth by Day contains a different set of spells or incantations or what have you. And that's also true for every edition. We have one here at the Detroit Institute of Art that I like looking at, but they just discovered one that was, I think, 30 meters long or something. So I do intend to get to it eventually. It's just such a complicated text. All right, let me start scrolling through and grabbing a couple of questions. So, Amy Jones, how's the absence business coming? More details to come. But good. All right. Great. I see some. All right. V. Scott, interested to see how the viewership in the latest episodes are doing. I know you said the stuff that you typically don't like does better. Seeing these episodes did well. They did do pretty good. I can look at the stats. The Thoth episode did incredibly well. I like that one. The theurgy one, I forgot about the theurgy one. It did pretty well. All of them performed okay. Yeah, they all performed like sort of in the ballpark of what I expect. But yeah, I think they did fine. The trouble with this channel in a general way is that we sort of rotate through a lot of topics, and as you can imagine, with the subscriber base that we have, some folks are just interested in like alchemy. Some folks are interested in magic. Some folks are interested in Abrahamic stuff. Some folks are not interested in that Abrahamic stuff at all. And so, as I rotate through content, some stuff is going to excite some people, and sometimes some stuff is not going to excite other people. And so that's just the way that it goes. I think when you're really trying to cover in a pretty broad way topics in esotericism, some stuff read, Kabbalah might be really interesting for some people. Some people might be totally disinterested in that, and that's totally fair. You can't be interested in everything, I don't guess. Maybe you can be, but again, I'm super happy that folks take the time to watch my content. They take the time to dig into it, leave comments. So for me, the fact that 50,000 people, 60,000 people watch an episode, that's just incredibly inspiring to me. So I'm really, really thankful for everybody who takes the time to watch this, to watch the material. So I think it performed, all performed well enough. The series Supernatural. I have never seen it, so I can't comment on this. I cannot comment on that. I don't know how authentic the stuff in Supernatural was. I'm sorry. Melchizedek, Melchizedek. Hot evening in Italy. Yeah, we're having a hot evening here in Michigan. So I sympathize with you. Yeah, I'm going to do a whole episode on Melchizedek because he is a super fascinating, strange figure, and he features large in Christianity as kind of a pre-incarnation of Jesus, and he's also features very broadly in the Kabbalah as well. He's one of these great mysterious characters that we don't really know what exactly he was. But what's cool about him is all the lore that's grown up around who he was. He's such a mysterious character in the Bible that there's all this great lore. And I want to do an episode a bit like I did on the Lilith episode, where I sort of go through a lot of the lore around Lilith. I also want to go through a lot of the lore around Melchizedek. So, yep, I do want to get to that. But I can't. I mean, to answer the question briefly, he was a king in Jerusalem before when Abraham showed up in the Bible, but he's very mysterious otherwise. In fact, his Melchizedek is actually not even a name; it's probably a title. It just means righteous king. So he's very, very mysterious. So mysterious that we don't even know his name. But yeah, an episode coming soon. Hey Travis, will I be doing a course on Merkavah? I really, really want to. It's gonna. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm going to Europe in 3 weeks to do some work with the Embassy of the Free Mind and do some traveling. The one book I'm bringing with me, when you really bring the one book, it really means you got to work through the book. Is I'm going to bring the Davila collection of the Merkavah literature, so I can basically read it when I have downtime, and on the plane and on trains and things. And so that's going to be my reading while I'm away. And ideally, the idea would be I'll get all the reading done and I'll get the course designed, and hopefully sometime leading up in the fall, maybe, or the late summer, I'll hopefully do the class on the Merkavah stuff. What I'm thinking about doing is having the class open and available first to patrons of the channel, so they can ask questions and interact with me through the class that way. And then in the same way I did with the Kabbalah class, and then a week later it will all be kicked over for free on YouTube, of course. So I think that's probably the way I'll structure it. But I am taking the Davila book with me, and that is the plan for my European travels, is to just work on that stuff. Have I read The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind? Yeah, I reread this after I watched the first season of Westworld. I had read it in undergrad, and I reread it, and I was much less impressed with it with the second time I read it. But it is an interesting theory. I may cover it at some point on the channel, because I just think I love theories like that, because I don't know that I believe in Julian James's theory. I'm not sure he even believed it, by the way. I think he was sort of thinking out loud. I think, especially toward the end of his life, I think he did not believe it for sure. But I do love really daring theories like that don't have to be accurate, but they're like, let's just think through this for a second. And I love adventuresome, daring theories, regardless of whether they're true or not, because they push the envelope of where our imaginations are. And I think that kind of work is super, super important. So I have read it. I don't agree with it. I'm not sure he did either, but I think it's a daring work of speculative neurophilosophy, and it's certainly worth reading. I think it's a great book. Maybe I'll cover it on the channel. Fulcanelli, I'm glad to see you're alive and doing well. You must be 200 years by now. But yeah, thanks for the super thanks. And yeah, I will keep doing what I am doing. One of a kind. I will keep doing it. Thank you. Thank you for supporting the doing of the things that I do. Um, Question: what happened to you with Lilith that scared you as a younger kid? Nothing scared me. It's funny. Nothing scared me about Lilith, and I didn't really think about Lilith aside from like she's like cool, like lesbian feminist icon. I didn't really think about Lilith until I had kids, and then I began to realize, when you sort of get that "is my kid still breathing" moment, I'm like, oh yeah, this is why people were terrified of Lilith. And there's so many amulets, anti-Lilith amulets that have survived, and it's absolutely the case that I get it now. I get why people are terrified of her. So I never had any encounters with her as a little kid, thank God. But I do now get and understand a bit better as a parent why people were so spooked out by her, and fearsome and respectful of her, and so that totally makes a ton of sense now. But yeah, I never had anything that when I was a kid that spooked me about Lilith. Um, Had some weird encounters, maybe. I think I maybe saw a ghost when I was a kid one time. I can tell that story if you guys are interested. But again, I don't trust my own memory just because I was a kid, and memories just unreliable in general, and children's memories are very unreliable. So I don't really trust my own memory. Um, do you believe from a non-Christian's perspective that Paul simply fell into the two divinities trap during his vision? You know, I don't know that it's a trap. I think that, that Jewish bitheism was a pretty big strand of Jewish theology that existed at least in the time of the Tanaim, all the way into the Amorim for sure, all the way into the composition of the Talmud. And so Jewish bitheism was a thing of some kind, probably existed even prior to that. And I think that it's less that Paul fell into a trap of it, is that he just availed himself of what made his vision make sense, that he had a vision of the resurrected Christ, Jesus, and there was already sort of floating in the air Jewish bitheism, and I think he was just like, "That's it," So I don't, again, it's not for me to judge. I'm not a theologian, so it's not for me to diagnose what is kosher theology or whatever. But I think that he simply availed himself of what was already on the ground, and I do think this is, it could be the case that this is why the rabbis become very anxious about bitheism, especially by the time of the composition of the Talmud, that this bitheism heresy, the two powers in heaven heresy, really freaked them out. And I think that it may have freaked them out, and that being freaked out is kind of a cover for the worry about Christianity. Because one of the things you'll notice about the Babylonian Talmud is it's surprisingly free of any worries about Christianity. Of course, they're living in a Sasanian context, and Christianity isn't really a big deal over there in the Sasanian context. Much bigger deal over in the Eastern Mediterranean. But I think it could be the case that that they were worried about that from this Jewish bitheism perspective. Right. I'm planning to do one on the Mandeans. Yes, although I'm not going to do one on the Mandeans, generally speaking, because there are two great episodes already on the Mandeans done by Philip and Andrew. So I'm not going to do a general episode about the Mandeans. Probably what I'll do is do specific books of the Mandeans. For instance, I would want to do an episode on the Genzaraba. So I'm probably going to be um, much more zoomed in, much more granular, and really zoom in on that stuff. So I'll probably do episodes, particularly on Mendian scriptures, like the Genzaraba, the Hawanda Waita, those texts. So yes, I will be doing episodes on the Mandeans, but probably really granular episodes on the Mandeans. I was super obsessed with the Mandeans when I was in undergrad. I just have read everything I could Mandean wise. So I even looked at some of the reproductions of the scrolls that you can check out. Those are super, super cool. So yes, Mandean content to come, but probably again really granular content, just because other channels have done really a good job on them already. Thank you, Josh, for the super thanks. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Um, all right. It's an interesting question about the use of psychedelic plants within the Egyptian priesthood. The best guess we have is like blue lotus and alcohol. We don't have a lot of evidence of anything else, but we do know that that the Egyptians would soak blue lotus in beer, and we do know that blue lotus is narcotic, psychotropic, so that probably had something to do with it. Also, khat grows just south of there, and I wouldn't be surprised if khat wasn't also being used in that context as well. Certainly down in Somalia and other places, Ethiopia, there's khat. Um, just in Hamtramck, there's khat. We have a lot of Yemenis that live here, and khat is sort of a thing. So I would suspect stuff about khat, maybe, but Blue Lotus and beer, I think, is what we know for sure. I've done Georgian. I've actually made a whole episode about the conversations in the House of Life. Look up my episode on the demonic book of Thoth. So I've done a whole episode on it. So if you want to check it out, feel free. So Frater Zygmunt, I think I heard that you had a birthday. So happy birthday, if that's true, and if not, you'll have a birthday, God willing, at some point. So I really appreciate you having a happy birthday. I read in a book of dubious historical accuracy. I wonder what book that was, that claimed that none of the mystics ever talked about the excretory system of God. Is this true? Is there anywhere I can read about the divine anus? That's a great question. I mean, there's a solar anus. That's some great George Bataille stuff, so you can check that out. That's fantastic. I'm trying to think. There's a great thing about Valentinus, the Gnostic, actually said that Jesus never crapped, that he could eat, but he didn't have to crap. So that's a place where I don't know if Jesus had an anus or not, but I bet he did. The things I say on this channel boggle my mind sometimes. But Valentinus talks about how Jesus never crapped. So that's a thing. But no, I don't know even Maimonides even brags about the fact that Hebrew is such a pure language, it doesn't even have words for things like that. He is a sort of a point of pride for Maimonides. He's a point of pride, point of prude. But to my knowledge, at least in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament and mystical literature around those texts, I can't think of a place. I mean, sometimes in the Hebrew Bible, the text will talk about God's penis, God's phallus, his loins. Of course, God has a big energy, and that's a thing that the great book about the body of God talks about. So God sometimes is depicted as having a penis, but not so much a anus. Not that I know of. But that's a great question. Yeah, we should. Someone should write that out if it hasn't been written already. But yeah, I think Bataille explores some stuff about divine butt stuff in the Solar Anus. You can check that book out. Divine butt stuff. This is my life. At what point in your life did you feel driven to research into the occult, the esoteric, and the unknown? Was there a particular moment that shook you? No, this is why these conversations are great. I don't mind answering personal questions. It doesn't. Some folks feel very guarded, and we should respect folks who feel guarded about the personal life, and that's a thing we should respect. As respect your content creators' boundaries. But I don't. This is not a boundary I feel particularly guarded about. I just grew up on watching strange movies. I love horror films. I love scary movies. I loved, shows about Atlantis and ghosts and unsolved mysteries and Robert Stack walking into the fog. And it just went from there. I never really gave up on it, and I was always interested in it. But I never had an experience like I saw a ghost or, I tried to summon a monster or something. Nothing like that ever happened. So it was always just an intellectual curiosity that eventually became a academic curiosity that eventually became a YouTube job. So that's kind of the short version of the story. So, Alchemy Studio, is there one modern compilation of the Book of Coming Forth by Day with all the variant spells added into one text? Kind of. Hold on, I'll grab some of them. So if you're going to get a copy of the Book of Coming Forth by Day, you're going to want to get two copies. You're going to want to get this one by Schauf, the Book of the Dead by Schauf. This one's nice because it has it has a really great introduction to the text, and it has a really great reproduction of the text, which is really important. I think it's really important to see these documents. So you want to get this one by Schaff, and the most complete edition that exists in English is the Allen Book of Coming Forth by Day, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. This one contains, I think, virtually all of the spells, along with a bunch of plates. It also has a photographic reproduction, and I think it has almost all the spells that are in the Book of Coming Forth by Day. There may be some missing, but this is basically the best academic edition of the Book of the Dead. I know that everybody has on their shelf the old Wallace Budge one, but that is super out of date, even though it has the hieroglyphics on there, and it is not reliable. So those are the two that I would recommend if you want sort of the two most important books on the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Those are going to be what I would recommend, and I think that's basically the standard reference in the literature. So I'm an Orthodox Christian. Hey, Josh, welcome back. Orthodox Christian. Do you feel like there's a continuity between Jewish mysticism and, say, that of the monastics? I think that mysticism, the kinds of Eastern Mediterranean mysticism, like Iamblichus and some of the Kabbalah stuff, early Jewish mysticism, I do think that it survived a bit better in the Eastern Orthodox world with hesychasm and stuff like that than it survived in the Latin West. The Latin Western mysticism is a very different strain of mysticism. It's a much more intellectual mysticism. So I think that the Eastern Orthodox Church maintains a significantly higher component of the mystical traditions of the Eastern Mediterranean, as opposed to mysticism and monasticism. I mean, Judaism really never messed around with monasticism. I mean, there's a little bit with the Essenes and the Therapeutae, but those are all very tiny movements. They're just famous because of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're famous because Josephus mentions them, and some Christians thought they might be Christians. But Judaism has never really been interested in monasticism. And so I would say less so there, but in terms of a continuity, there is a bit more continuity, mystical continuity in the Eastern Orthodox Church than in the Latin West. Although the Latin West has a very rich mystical tradition that is, in some sense, indigenous to the Latin West. Sorry, I'm drinking my afternoon coffee. Genghis Galahad, it's good to see you. I mean, I would touch on Hecate, but I mean, again, Angela's covered it, so I think that she's done a great job covering Hecate. I don't know what I might add. It'd be interesting to talk to Dr. Switza about the role of Hecate. She's doing some really great stuff where she's actually imaging and mapping out how the gods are related in the PGM. It's really amazing stuff. She's such a great scholar. And we could look maybe at some of the relationships Hecate has with other gods, but Dr. Puka's already done a good episode on Hecate, so I don't think that I think it might be redundant for me to do one. Right. Dionea. Thank you very much for your. Yeah, I'm glad that this has been beneficial for your mental and spiritual health. Carl Jung psychoanalysis. Oh boy, this is where I get canceled. Or if you plan to make a series on him, I don't plan to make a series on Jung. I'm not that big a fan of Jung, just personally, intellectually. I'm not a big fan of Jung. Now, me not being a fan of him doesn't mean he's not important. He's clearly incredibly important, and he's clearly had a massively important impact on many people's lives. So me disliking Jung has no bearing on anything aside from the fact that I intellectually think I disagree with him, and I prefer other forms of psychoanalysis, which I think are also equally problematic. FYI, it's probably just aesthetics on my part, frankly. But I do plan to do some episodes on Jung's take on alchemy. I do want to do an whole episode on Jung's take on alchemy, and also I want to cover some of his Gnosticism stuff as well. So maybe the Red Book and some of his sermons to the dead. So I do want to cover him because I do think he's incredibly important. But yeah, in terms of psychoanalysis, I'm much more a fan of Freud, especially the late Freud, metapsychological Freud. I really like the metapsychology stuff. And of course, I'm a big fan of Lacan and Lacanian psychoanalysis, just because I'm coming out of the structuralist world and I'm a structuralist thinker. I would identify as a structuralist. And so I'm much more of a fan of Lacan and his work. But again, not to downplay the importance of Jung. Jung is incredibly important. Right. But yeah, I definitely intend to get to some Jung stuff. Um, let's see here. So many kind comments. Let me make sure to get to these super chats. Um, I'll definitely get to the others. Yeah, I'm a little familiar. So this is a confession I'll have to make. I don't watch much esoterica like related YouTube content. Most of the content, the YouTube content I consume, has nothing to do with religious studies. I mean, I watch my friends because they're my friends, and I like to watch what they do. But I've actually did a podcast with Third Eye Drops. I know of Agrippa's Diary. I've watched a little bit of that, but I watch very little esoterica related YouTube content. Really, most of what I watch is very different stuff. I can go into what I watch on YouTube as if anyone cares about that, but I watch a little bit of it, but not much. So I know of Eternalized. They make really, really great content over Agrippa's Diary. It's also making good content. It's different than what I do, but I'm not familiar with Max Darrant or the Academy of Ideas. But I'm always happy to talk to anyone. Usually when I bring someone on the show, it's because they have a hyper specialization in something I'm really, really interested in, like the Book of You or whatever. But yeah, I've talked to Third Eye Drops. He's a great guy. I had a really great conversation with him recently. So yeah, it's fantastic. Give a special thanks to Jorge. I was just in Utah recently, and got to hang out with Jorge. And man, what a fantastic host you were! And I'm just really honored that you shared some of your story with me. We got to hang out. We got to go to a Mormon LDS temple before it was consecrated, so I got to see the inside of the Saratoga Springs, the new temple there, and just had to hang out and chat. So, man, thank you so much for your hospitality, and thank you publicly. Just an awesome guy, and so thoughtful. This has great grasp of this kind of material, and really doing some cool personal work as well. So thank you, brother. I really appreciate the time you spent with me in Utah, and thank you so much. Um, so thoughts on the Mount Ebal curse tablet. My thoughts of it are I'll basically believe what Christopher Rolston believes. I am super skeptical of those tablets. I've seen the drawings that they claim, and that I don't see it. Most scholars don't see it. I am very skeptical. The fact that they have not published those in an actual archaeology journal, the fact that they've not handed over that stuff to actual epigraphers like Christopher Woolston, who's just the OG epigrapher of Northwest Semitic inscriptions, um, I am not confident in the Mount Ebal inscription. I am very, very skeptical. So but hey, it would be awesome if if it really is true. I'd be the first to admit that my skepticism was unfounded, but they are just acting sketch AF with those texts, and I am absolutely skeptical that what they say is on there is on there. I definitely don't see it, and I think who are most people who are of who know their stuff about this material are also super skeptical. So yeah, no, I am not. Um, I am not confident that those are actually good. All right, let's scroll down and grab some more questions, folks. Zach Elfasi, thank you. Thoughts on advanced generative AI and the sacredness of the word, alphabet, and creation and reality. Thanks for all you do. Yeah, thank you. Um, I guess I don't have a lot of thoughts about AI, and I know you're supposed to have a lot of thoughts about AI because it's all the rage in Chat GPT and this, that, and the other. Um, I don't have a lot of thoughts on it, frankly. I think it's a useful tool. It is it's useful for generating ideas. It's bad for fleshing them out, and it's going to get better, of course, and it eventually will replace some people. But I don't think that I'm just not that impressed with it. I like I've tinkered with it a little bit, and I've asked it some like you know relatively probing questions, and it does very poorly, very poorly. I think it's impressive to people who know Wikipedia level knowledge of stuff. Anything deeper than that, it performs very bad at. So I don't know. I'm not that impressed with it, and I don't have a lot of thoughts about it as an intelligence. I think it is a very weak form of intelligence, a very unimpressive form of intelligence in some ways. But I do look forward to the future of AI. I do think AI is going to be an incredibly important part of our technological development, and I am looking forward to it. I'm not the least bit frightened of it. And insofar as it replaces people's jobs, well, that's just what technology does, unfortunately. People felt the same way about the loom. When the loom came in, people were like, it's going to destroy all these people's jobs. And it did. And there were people actively destroying looms because, sort of the word sabotage comes from people throwing their clogs into the loom to break the looms. But the loom is coming and we see it coming. And the question is, we have to prepare for it. And I'm not the least bit worried about that. And if it puts me out of a job, then I probably wasn't doing at least my job very well at some level. So I think it's an exciting tool. And I think that AI is an exciting tool in religion. And I think that insofar as people find it to be integrating into their religious life as a disembodied intelligence of at least some kind, that's fascinating. And I'm looking forward to the anthropological studies that come out of it. But um, yeah, I'm not terribly interested in it at this point. Yep, I answered this one about the Mandeans. So yes, Mandean stuff to come. Yeah, this is a great question. Doing an episode on the mystic origins of the Quakers and Shakers. Yeah, I would love to do an episode on the Quakers and the Quakers and the Shakers. I would also love to do an episode on the Levelers and the Diggers, which are sort of esoteric versions of political Christianity that existed during the 17th century. The Levelers and the Diggers are fascinating. But also, I'd love to do an episode on the Pennsylvania Dutch and their magical practices, which are very extensive and not well understood and well documented. And one of the reasons why I haven't done much work on the Pennsylvania Dutch is just because there's not a lot there. There's not a lot of great books about it, and it's a pretty insular tradition, but it is an authentically sort of American tradition of cunning work or magic, or however how you want to put it. So the Pennsylvania Dutch and those magical traditions are super interesting. But yeah, I've kind of done an episode a little bit on the Quakers and how the Quakers and the Quakerism and Kabbalah had a weird relationship early on in colonial America. If you want to check that out in my episode on how Kabbalah came to America, I talk about the interesting intersection of Kabbalah and Quakerism, both in England and also back in the New World. And I did an episode on Lady Anne Conway, and how Lady Anne Conway also became converted to Quakerism, and how Quakerism and Kabbalah were interacting there with Van Helmont. So again, those are interesting intersections. But yeah, I would love to do some more stuff on esoteric Christianities in the New World and in the 17th century. So that would be great. All right. Darkwing Duke. Will you cover the relationship between the occult and martial arts practice, like deities coming to give you martial arts skills, like Dragon Ball Z? Yeah, it's not an area that I have a lot of expertise in because I just don't cover Eastern or Asian esotericism or East Asian esotericism, so it's not something I have a lot of experience with. I do plan to at some point to do, and this is so self-indulgent and ridiculous, but I really am interested in Yukio Mishima, or Mishima Yukio, I guess is the proper way of doing his name. And he wrote a really great book called Taiyo Totetsu, or an essay really called Sun and Steel. It's sort of about the esoteric dimension of weightlifting. And he had a very complicated relationship to his body. And being a lifter, I've read Taiyo Totetsu and Sun and Steel, and it really has inspired me to think about the sort of esotericism of lifting, which I know sounds completely ridiculous, and it's a little bit self-indulgent, I'll admit, but I'm kind of interested in drawing out Mishima's idea about weightlifting and the relationship of the body to language to consciousness, and the aesthetics of bodybuilding and lifting, and sort of the dark dimension of that, at least that it took in his own life. So Mishima is an incredibly complex character, that I'd like to cover. And of course, his death is unfortunately quite famous. And his novels are very, very amazing as well. So I'm not sure I'll be covering martial arts stuff in East Asian because I just don't know a lot about that. I don't work in that field, but I would like to cover this Mishima episode at some point. That's an interesting question. What's one artifact from all of time you would love to personally inspect? What's an artifact I would love to personally get my hands on, or at least look at closely? I don't know if there's any artifact that, like, out of a museum I'd want to personally flip through. I mean, it'd be kind of cool to flip through the Voynich manuscript. I'd like to flip through it just in person, just like actually leaf through it. That would be kind of cool to flip through the Voynich manuscript at the Rare Book Library. Be neat to handle the John Dee equipment that survived, the seals and stuff that survived. That would be kind of neat to see some of that stuff, to handle some of that stuff. But I don't know. I'm not really handling them tactilely doesn't do much for me. I'm not really that big in that. So yeah, I'm not that not that interested. But it would be kind of neat to be able to leaf through the Voynich manuscript or something like that. But I don't think there's any other artifact. I don't know. It'd be kind of cool to hold the meteoric steel dagger of Tutankhamun. That's a pretty boss knife made of meteoric steel. So that would be kind of cool to hold. But I don't know. I'm not that big on that kind of stuff. Just seeing it in person would be great. All right. As an exorcist, wow, you are an exorcist. As an exorcist, the content has been extremely useful in resolving several cases. Well, I'm glad. Anything I can do to beat back the dark and damn demons bothering people. Insofar as you're engaged in exorcisms, if I can help, please let me know. I definitely don't want demons bothering people, and insofar as I can do anything to provide relief, I would be more than happy to do it. So thank you. Oh, demons. Yeah, thank you, Steve, for the super sticker. I appreciate you supporting the channel that way. You plan doing an episode on Alboni's Son of Knowledge? That would be great. See an academic text. Probably not. I mean, the Shams Amarif has that text is barely. There's a great episode on that text by as much as we have I can't read Arabic, so I can't work with it in the original. And there's a recent translation of a chunk of it, and I think that Philip over Let's Talk Religion has done a great episode on it. So I probably won't be covering it. Also, I don't like covering text in which I don't have access to the original language. So if I don't have access to it, I'm not so keen on doing that. And Arabic is a language I don't have great fluency in, or really much fluency in. So I would not want to do that. But yeah, you should check out Philip's episode about it. It's great work. Great work he's done there. Any request? So I have an interview request. Archbishop Alexander Golitsyn. He's done scholarly work on the crossovers between Merkavah and Orthodox Christian mysticism. Also, have I ever read David Bentley Hart before? I've never read either of those folks, but I'd love if you have I'd love to see the if you can put a link to the description or put a link to the books. I'd love to take a look at them between the Merkavah Orthodox mysticism stuff. I'd be happy to take a look at that. And look at the work and see whether what I think about it. And yeah, I'd be assuming the work is up to snuff. I would love to do it, but no, I've never read either David Bentley Hart or the Orthodox mysticism stuff. I don't do much work in the Orthodox world. I tend to focus on the Latin West again mainly because my Latin is stronger. My Latin is stronger than my Greek, and certainly stronger than Russian or whatever. But that tends to be where I land. But yeah, you absolutely happy to take a look at that work. Was Paul a Pharisee? Probably. I mean, he wasn't a Sadducee. So was he a Pharisee? Probably. Was he taught by Gamaliel? Did he sit at the feet of Gamaliel? I don't know. Maybe. It's a weird thing to. I mean, It's an interesting flex. I mean, it's like an interesting thing to brag about, but maybe. Um, if he did, he was never a major student because we never see him, and he's not a Tana. He never appears in any of the Tanit literature. But yeah, absolutely possible. Possible. He had to learn from someone. Clearly, he was engaged in Merkavah mysticism. He had to learn that from somebody. So he was a part of the rabbinical establishment at some level. But yeah, of course he was a Pharisee because basically that was all there was. So that would be my guess. Oh wow, I'm so far behind. Ronald Jordan, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Yeah, someone mentions Raimundo Lull. Yeah, I'm going to be covering him at some point soon as well. And I have a volume of his. I have his complete works, by the way, that is going to be up for sale soon. So I'm building my summer catalog of esoteric rare books, and the complete works of Lull in a 16th century copy, I think is what I have. So those will be available if you want to buy one. So I'm going to be having that for offer. But yeah, I want to do something on Raimondo or Raimondo Lull as well. See the modern hermeticist, Dr. Dan Trail is in the chat. The esoteric implications of being canceled. You get occulted. So we don't get canceled in the occult world. You get occulted. You get involuntarily occulted. So you become like the Mahdi. I don't know. I don't want to find out. I don't want to get a cult canceled. Dan, I hope you're doing well. I'd like to catch up with you. Holler at me. I sent you an email with a picture of a Ficino book that I picked up. So take a look at it when you get a chance. I'd love to catch up and work with you on something. Especially hopefully now that your summer is freed up a little bit. But subscribe to the Modern Hermeticist, folks, if you're not already. It's great content. Great content. Just watched a documentary claiming that knowledge in the Kabbalah was taken from the Druids. That is definitely not true. That is laughably, that is really hilariously bad. Yeah, that definitely didn't happen. All right. All right. King Galahad, we said that Jungian Gnosticism is the foremost or most complex. I don't know if it's the foremost. I don't know. I would say Valentinianism was probably the largest sect of what we now call Gnosticism. That would be my guess. That Valentinianism was the largest. Is the most complex? It's pretty complex. And just in terms of moving parts, I mean, in terms of moving parts, I would say it's pretty complex in that way. So, but foremost, no, probably not. I'm sure Valentinianism was probably the largest of the sects. We don't even know how big the Jungian movement was, if assuming it was in fact a movement. All right. What are your general thoughts on Zizek and more specifically the interpretation of Hegel? I love Zizek. He's kind of gotten a little off the rails in the past few years, become sort of weirdly, boringly centrist in some ways. But I like Zizek. I like some aspects of his interpretation of Hegel. I have to admit that like his recent book on Hegel. What was it? I can't even remember it now. It's an absolute zero, something like that. I didn't like it. I wasn't that impressed with it. It's not my favorite, but yeah, I like Zizek. I think his interpretation of Christianity is really interesting. But as a person who comes out of the Hegelian world myself, I would identify as a kind of Hegelian, a weird Hegelian. So I'm kind of soft on that stuff. So I'm not a impartial judge. Jung, Lacan, and Freud are all massively influential in Japan. Interesting. I know that was true in like Argentina, but I didn't know that was true in Japan. Huge Jungian. Japanese esotericism. Thank you for the donations. I would like to cover again. It's just about the fact that I don't know much about esotericism in the East Asian world. I was hoping to team up with an academic to do some stuff on Western esotericism as it appears in like manga and anime. maybe that's still on the possibility list. That was in the works a long time ago, and maybe I just need to to bump that back up to center stage. But that'd be a case where they could bring their expertise on Japanese culture and manga and anime, and I could bring mine on Western esotericism, and we can have a really fruitful crossover combination. But again, to cover something like Shingon Buddhism, I would have to really know a lot more about it than I do. I don't read Japanese, so that's not the thing I would want to do. Just again, because I don't have access to the original languages, and to me, that's absolutely important. Absolutely important. All right. Yeah, we covered the angel Raphael in the book of Tobias. I have covered it actually. This is a very short section in the book of Tobit, right, where the angel Raphael's hanging out with Tobit, and they get a special fish, and they use its liver to drive Asmodeus away, and stuff like that. I think I've covered it in the Kabbalah lectures. I think I did. Maybe I've covered it in a class I did on angels. Um, but it's a fun little story. They make a good short video, I think. And also, it's the first appearance of Raphael. Sometimes I think of books like comic books, like first appearance of Wolverine, first appearance of Incredible Hulk, first appearance of Gambit. I think of first appearance of Raphael. So yeah, he first shows up in the book of Tobit. And so it's a fun book. Maybe I'll cover it. It's a short story, so maybe I'll cover it, and it's part of a part of a longer thing. But I do like the fact that Asmodeus like kills all. I think what's her name, Sarah. Asmodeus kills all of her suitors, and Raphael gives him this magic fish, or not magic fish, but the fish guts to drive this fish guts to drive off Asmodeus. All right. What do you think of non-Jewish people studying or incorporating Kabbalah into their practice? It's fine. I don't really have an opinion about that. I don't really like. I don't think of Kabbalah as closed practice or whatever lingo the young people are using these days. If you publish books and you make them freely available, then so sorry, your ideas are now in the marketplace of ideas. People are going to use them. It doesn't really. If you want to have your ideas be secret and be esoteric, don't translate them to English. Don't publish them. Don't put them on Amazon. Don't put them on the internet, because the moment you do that, they enter into the public domain, and that's just the way that knowledge transfer happens, and religious transfer happens. And so I just don't. I think a lot of this the pearl clutching that goes on with what's closed practice or whatever in the occult community just misses the entire reality of cultural exchange. And so now I get why that happens. I get that people want to guard against the pernicious effects of cultural appropriation or cultural imperialism or something like that. Sure. But you're simply foolish to believe that you can hold back the tide of cultural exchange. And insofar as these mystical texts of any tradition are being put out there in the marketplace of ideas, once they're out there, and they're out there for anyone to use as they see fit, basically. So, what I would say is that if you do incorporate Kabbalah into your practice, don't do it in a cringe way, because you look really embarrassing when you like misspell Hebrew words or like badly mispronounce Hebrew. Like, God, that stuff is so cringe. When you like you don't really understand Hebrew or don't really understand Kabbalah at all, and you're like adding that stuff in. Uh, you just look real silly badly pronouncing Hebrew words. So if you're going to incorporate it, like do your homework, maybe talk to a rabbi, talk to a Jewish community, go to your local Chabad house and like talk to the rabbi there. Um, so that'd be my advice. But yeah, I think that once the ideas are out there, they're out there. And it's not, if you want to keep something esoteric, you better not put it on Amazon or the internet or whatever. Um, but yeah, yeah, I'm mostly just anti-cringe. I'm mostly anti-cringe, not so much like anti-cultural exchange. That's just going to happen. That's the nature of how things work. All right, let me scroll down and grab some more questions. Thank you guys for such Amazing questions. All right. So far, sorry, folks. I'm just scrolling through. How did the Catholics become the experts in exorcism when it seems like the Jewish people had more experience with that sort of thing back in the day? This is a great question. So they did and they didn't. So definitely it's the case that in the Second Temple period, Jews were associated with exorcisms, widely associated. Even Roman writers were like, if you got a demon problem, go get the Jews to fix it. And the most famous case, of course, is Josephus. Personally, was there when Vespasian saw an exorcism in public, and so I think it was Vespasian during the Jewish wars. And so this was a thing. And I think what ends up happening is that because Jesus became so interested in exorcisms, or he was really an expert in exorcisms, most of his miracles were exorcistically related in many ways, about half of them at least. That Christianity really latched on to doing exorcisms. And I think that kind of in the divorce between Judaism and Christianity, at some level, the Christians got exorcism. And after that, from about the time of the Talmud, the completion of the Talmud around 500, 600 of the Common Era, all the way up to the 16th century, there's not much evidence of Jewish exorcisms happening. So I think that it became associated with Christianity, and Judaism didn't want to have that look. And so they basically abandoned the practice. So much so, by the way, that when Jews did begin to do exorcisms again in the 16th century in Safed, they were bad at it. And in fact, people were so bad at it, they would go to local sheikhs and stuff to get their exorcisms done. Um, so I think it's less they became the experts. And there's an interesting story about how um, the exorcistic rituals in the Catholic Church developed, because we think of them being very formalized, but their formalization didn't happen in the 17th century. There were dozens of competing exorcism manuals that existed at that time. In fact, you could, in the order of the priesthood, the Catholic priesthood, you could do exorcisms well before you could do the mass. So low-level exorcists were like everywhere in Europe at the time. It was kind of like the lowest rung of the ladder in terms of being a priest. And so I think it's the case that the Catholics eventually picked it up, and it's not until the 17th century really that it gets institutionalized and regulated as the Roman ritual as we know it. Um, in fact, again, I have an exorcism manual coming, and what's interesting about the exorcism manual that I have coming is that it is one of the ones that actually is put on the Index Prohibitorum, the list of banned books, and it was put on the list of banned books primarily because necromancers were using it. It became more of a necromancer's manual than it did an exorcism manual, because again, think about the logic. If you can cast a demon out, then you can manipulate demons in all kinds of other ways. And these exorcists really went to great lengths to manipulate demons. They're part of the so-called clerical necromantic underground, which you can get a shirt of on the Esoterica merch store. And so it's funny that a lot of these exorcism manuals actually got banned. I'm going to be doing a whole episode on exorcism manuals, pre-Roman ritual exorcism manuals. So I'll be doing a whole episode about those and how they were basically appropriated by the clerical necromantic underground as part of the development of Western necromancy. So, and I have one coming. I have one for sale actually in the next book catalog. A pretty infamous one. So look forward to that. Exorcisms are so fun. I mean, not for the person being exorcised. Not for them. You could ask God one question and get an answer. I don't know. Why aren't you real? To quote my great professor and friend, Dr. James Bully. Modern Hermeticist. Thank you, Dan, trolling in the comments. You're pretty close to 100,000. You're going to get one in the mail too. So we can do our alchemy together. Turn it gold. Or we can just wait and get to a million, get a million subscribers and just like do it the old fashioned way. Any possible episode on Proclus? Yes. On the hen ads? God help me. so many henads. God, the henads overfloweth. The henads overfloweth. I have not listened to the new Black Braid singles yet. I do want to. I just have not got the chance to do it. But yeah, he's awesome. That is such great black metal. But yes, I do want to. Do want to get to those soon. Absolutely. Folks may notice that my shirt today is doubly dorky. It is Bit Brigade. Bit Brigade is an awesome band. It's like a punk band, but they live play through video games, and they play the entire theme, all the music of the video game in one go. So they'll play all the way through Ninja Gaiden, all the way through Castlevania, and they'll like play all of the music for the entire soundtrack and literally play the game and beat it live on stage. It's amazing. Bit Brigade is awesome. See them live if you love old school video games. Thanks for all your work. Thank you. Awesome. Got you back into studying some esotericism. Would you do another episode on the Anshe Maaseh? Who's your favorite? You like Choni the Circle Maker. I probably won't do another episode on them. I think I covered them pretty extensively in the episode that I did. Who's my favorite of the Anshe Maaseh? Probably Shimon Bar Yochai. He's just so crazy. He's such an extreme figure. So probably Shimon Bar Yochai, I would say. Choni's pretty great, though. Also Chanina Mendoza is great. He's fantastic as well. I do love him just because he was so humble and pious that miracles just sprang up around him. I love the phrase in the Talmud that his wife became accustomed to miracles, that they just happened so frequently that she became accustomed to miracles. So do scholars consider Paul to be a historical person, Peter, John? Yeah, most scholars do. I mean, mythicism, despite the fact that it's very popular on YouTube, is not a scholarly recognized position. No one in the scholarly world, in the academic, or virtually nobody is a mysticist. I think it's a very minoritarian position. It gets a lot of screen time on YouTube, but I'm not a mysticist. I'm fairly confident they all existed as historical people. So, so I'm fairly confident they were real. Like Jesus certainly was real. I don't know. All right, keep scrolling. Wheels stronger and faster. I don't know of any esoteric techniques to make wheels stronger or faster. Sorry. You could baptize them. You know, the church used to baptize bells. I've been reading Johann Weier's De Prestigiis Daemonum, on the wiles of demons, and he really hates the fact that they used to baptize bells. He thinks it's like the height of superstition. So you could baptize your bike wheels, but I don't have an answer for that. Maybe baptizing will make them go faster. Do you know of any writings by Mordecai Kaplan? Mordecai Kaplan's my man. Specifically about mysticism? No, I don't know of any. I mean, Mordecai Kaplan was not interested in that kind of stuff in the least. And so, no, I don't think he wrote much about Kabbalah at all. But for folks who are wondering, Mordecai Kaplan is the rabbi that I follow. He's sort of the leader of the movement that I believe in, and that I base my Judaism around. So I'm a follower of Mordecai Kaplan. But to my knowledge, he didn't write anything about mysticism, and to my knowledge. Okay. Gonna keep scrolling down and try to get to more questions. Because I know that I'm like trailing behind. Can I do an episode on Western exotericism? Dan, you're great. All right. Any chance of diving into South Central American esotericism? I mean, I would have to know a lot more about it. I just don't. I have a special interest in the Maya and the Aztecs, but like Santo, Santa Muerte, Santo Muerte and stuff like that. Yeah, I just don't know enough about it. I don't speak Spanish. It's just not it's not a world that I know a lot about. So no, I would have to really get really get into that in a way that I just don't have the expertise in. But I'd love to bring on experts if they're working in that field. I'd love to do that stuff. So, could you do a presentation of Wakima Fior? Hey, Dan, that's a thing you and I could work on. Is doing a joint project on Wakima Fior. I would love to do that with you. Dan's a big Wakima Fior guy, or Hildegard. I'd love to. I want to circle back to Hildegard, and yeah. So yeah, I'd love to do another episode on Hildegard. She's amazing. I'd love to do one on Joachim Fior. I mean, Dan and I could team up on that. Maybe Dan really knows his Joachim Fior, so maybe that would be that is a thing we could work on. That would be great. Okay. Low level exorcist sounds like something you're taking from an RPG. Yeah, but it is the case. I'm serious though. Like, I forget exactly what the levels of the priesthood, but exorcist is like number 1 or number 2. It's like the lowest. You it's like you only get like 10 experience points as an exorcist. So it is a very low level thing in the priesthood world. All right. So I was abruptly confronted with the Mormon doctrine of the pre-existence of souls as an argument against contraception. Where does this doctrine come from? It seems to be impactful for the LDS. Um, I, I mean, I don't know where precisely Joseph Smith got it from. Um, I'm fairly confident that, I mean, he probably just developed it out of his own mind. He was a pretty smart guy. And so I think that he developed it as part of the revelations. I think it might be in Doctrines and Covenants, but I think it was just part of the revelations that he got from God. So I'm fairly confident it was part of the revelations he got before he was martyred. So that's my guess, is that it's probably there. I don't know. I would have to flip through Doctrines and Covenants to see if it's in there, but it would be interesting to take a look at that. There's a lecture by James Lindsay on the relationship of esotericism with the left, as far as it goes to call Hegel a hermetic. Yeah, I saw parts of this lecture. My God, that was so terrible. It was like, it's like, what happens if I don't know anything about Marxism, and I don't know anything about Hermeticism, and I don't know anything about Hegel, and I go on for basically an hour and a half about nonsense? It was abominably bad. Someone sent it to me, and I just couldn't listen to it. It was just so, like, I don't even know the right word is. Like, how could you be so systematically incorrect? Just like the philosophy is wrong, the history is wrong, the influence is wrong, all of it's wrong. But it's part of a great conspiracy theory that, you want to believe that, socialism is Gnosticism, which is apparently also a strange belief that people have. I've seen this on some like history YouTube where people believe that Hitler was a Gnostic, and like it's just like why this channel Esoterica is like why Esoterica needs to exist, because there's just so much misinformation, and then it just feeds into these like psycho conspiracy theories. And so yeah, I did see this at least part of this lecture, and it was just laughably bad. But it's not laughable because there, like, lots of people believe this, and it's informing some versions of like the conservative right, and it's just really, really embarrassing. So yes, I saw it. It's really bad. Hegel was influenced by some Hermetic stuff. In the McGee text, the Hermetic Hegel kind of in my opinion, greatly overstates the case. But yeah, he was sort of influenced by Theosophy and by by Jakob Böhme and some Kabbalah and some stuff. Yeah, he was influenced by it. But he says repeatedly in his lectures on the history of philosophy that it is wildly wrong. He thinks that it contains a kernel of truth. Almost everything for Hegel contains a kernel of truth. But he thinks that it's fundamentally one-sided, and therefore, his philosophy is all about curing the one-sidedness of the development of historical philosophy. So calling Hegel a hermeticist, just not accurate. Hegel repudiates that in his lectures. So it's just more examples of people doing the history of philosophy very, very badly. Very, very badly. Episode on Spygyrix. This is interesting. I might do an episode on Spagyrics, by the way, this is interesting that people associate the word spagyrics as sort of an alternative to metal alchemy. This is just the weird word that Paracelsus used. He invented a lot of weird words. And it's just a weird word he used for alchemy in general. He uses spagyrics just as much for metallic alchemy as he does for working with plants, or other minerals to make medicines. I probably will do an episode on Hegel in the brain, on Paracelsus's medical theory, and sort of the esoteric dimensions of that and his theory of signatures and stuff like that. It could be kind of cool to work with Dr. Puca Angela with that, because she studied the Italian tradition of signatura, and I think that tradition, that tradition of signatura, is coming out of the Paracelsian tradition of medicine. And it will be interesting to cover the spagyric stuff, his medical stuff, in terms of his theory of medicine. So that would be something worth studying. But to be clear, Hegel, I mean, again, did it again. Hegel, Paracelsus. Paracelsus uses spagyrics to describe all kinds of things, including metallic alchemy. All right. Let me see here. It's a good question. You can weigh on this maybe too a little bit, Dan. Do we know if Pico della Mirandola or Joseph Viterbo picked up on any of the Hechelot undercurrents in Paul's vision? I doubt it. I mean, they wouldn't have known anything about Hechelot literature. None of the Hechelot material that was available to them at that time was translated for them. So I don't think they knew the first thing about Hechelot literature. Even the Zohar stuff, the Hechelot literature in the Zohar wasn't translated to Latin. So no, I doubt it very seriously. Dan would know better than me, I think, but you can weigh in, Dan, what you think, but I don't think they had access to any of that material. I mean, frankly, people didn't have access to that material until the 20th century, with the exception of the Sefer Hechelot. That was known, which is a version of Third Enoch. But most of the material from the Cairo Geniza wasn't known until the 20th century. All right. I'm a jeweler and I use occult and esoteric symbolism in my work. I was so excited to have found your channel with authentic knowledge and materialistic perspective. Please do an episode about occult jewelry. It's interesting. Yeah, it would be cool to do one on like talismans and stuff. Like maybe do one on, was it Al-Biruni had a great book on talismans and sort of the talismanic lore. Of course, there's famous talismans and the Picatrix and stuff like that. So yeah, it'd be cool. To do one on that. But yeah, it's a great idea. I should do one on sort of occult jewelry. I want to do one on the Urim and Thummim. That's one that I want to do pretty soon. That's a pretty famous piece of occult jewelry. So you talk to God. So that's kind of cool. Will you be making a video specifically about the Kabbalion? If not, why not? No. Probably I will not do an episode on the Kabbalion. And the main reason why I won't do an episode on the Kabbalion is it's a 20th century text. I just don't do much work in the 20th century. It's just not, it's not a hermetic text, not really, or not historically. And also it's just, it's a 20th century channel text. I think it's interesting in that regard, but it's out of the wheelhouse of this channel. Mostly we work on things prior to 1800. So, yeah, Dan Trail's actually done a good episode on, is the Kabbalion hermetic? I think the short answer basically is not really. But it's also just a text of like New Thought, and New Thought is interesting. It's important, but I probably won't be doing it on the channel just because, it's not historically hermetic text. It's not historically hermetic text. Yeah, I would love to do an episode on Origin. I love Origin. I think Origin was the first real genius that Christianity ever produced. Everyone before that was kind of middling. I mean, Origin was really the first great genius of Christianity. And it's a pity that at least Originism gets thrown under the bus. But I would like to do an episode on Origin. His book on First Principles is really the first true work of Christian genius, in my opinion. So I think it would be cool to do an episode on his book of First Principles. But yeah, maybe or an episode on Origin, and mostly just because he got sort of, Originism got declared a heresy. Origin himself was never declared a heretic, I don't think. I think Originism was condemned, but Origin himself was kind of saved. But maybe I'll do an episode on Origin. I really find Origin to be an utterly fascinating character. Um, one of the great geniuses of Christianity, especially early Christianity. Lucas, do you think there's a relationship between the Greek words askalepios and akephalos? I don't think so. Because akephalos is just two words. It's just the word head and the word not, the prefix not. So I don't think that they're connected. I don't think they're connected, at least not linguistically. Make a video on Kaplan. I don't know. I think it's kind of outside the purview of the, like you said, it's a bit outside the purview of the channel because it's not really esoterica and it's not Kabbalah or anything. And it would be just basically me describing why I follow Mordecai Kaplan and why I think Reconstructionist, or at least Kaplanian philosophy. I'm not so sure about Reconstructionism these days. But Kaplanian, I like Kaplanian, Judaism. So, but I doubt I'll cover it just because it's not really in the wheelhouse of what this channel covers. Thoughts on Rudolf Steiner? I've not covered his work because it's 20th century, so I probably won't. I don't have a lot of thoughts on Rudolf Steiner. I've not really studied him. I don't really study stuff in the 20th century very much. So people often wonder, like, are we gonna do an episode on Franz Bardon or Rudolf Steiner or someone like the 20th century people? You'd be surprised to learn I don't read those guys. I basically have never read like Initiation into Hermetics. I've never read Ushpinsky or Gurdjieff, or aside from just very cursory, like Wikipedia level understanding of them, I've never read Steiner. I basically don't work in the 20th century. So I know that sounds very shocking to people, but like Wicca, I know very little about Wicca. Very little about tarot cards, mostly because it's mostly tarot cards really have become a thing in the 20th century in a big way. So yeah, my knowledge, if you kind of think about my knowledge, once I get to about 1850, everything drops off dramatically until basically I know virtually nothing about 20th century stuff. A little bit of Aleister Crowley because I was kind of forced to, but so I know a little bit about Crowley, a little bit about Austin Spare, but all things told, I don't do any work in the 20th century. So Steiner, yeah, like that stuff just is not in my wheelhouse. Not in my wheelhouse. Let's see. Let me scroll back down. Yeah, we should do a watch party of a watch party of the of that thing about Hermeticism and the left. The left, as if the left is a thing that exists. Like that is the most hilarious idea, is that there's a unified left. That definitely isn't that. Have you seen student of Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg, Ariel Cohen Aloro's YouTube project to interpret the New Testament in Kabbalistic terms? No. What's the right way of putting this? One, I'm just not interested in actually being a Kabbalist, so I'm not interested in trying to reclaim Kabbalah. Also, that's really anachronistic and weird. The New Testament predates the Kabbalah by 1,200 years. So applying Kabbalistic ideas from the 13th century onto a first century Judean text, that doesn't make the least bit of sense to me. It sounds interesting, but that sounds like an exercise in pretty shocking anachronism. So yeah, I'm not so much interested in that. Let's see. Keep scrolling down. Would you do a deep dive of video game religion, like Religion for Breakfast? That would require me to play video games, which I just don't have time for, unfortunately. I'd love to, but yeah, I heard the new Zelda game is just like the best thing ever. But yeah, I just don't have time in the sense that I just don't have the time to do it. But so probably not, unless I'm able to link up with someone who really knows video games really well, and maybe I could do like an explainer. Like the new Diablo, the new Diablo game is coming out. And they're going to be, I think Lilith is like the big bad guy, bad woman, bad demoness in that. And so if, the people that made that game want to sit down and talk about Lilith and sort of historical Lilith stuff, I'd be happy to do that. but yeah, I would have to know a lot more video game stuff, which I just don't have time for, unfortunately. Um, so yeah, this is the thing. Also, one of the things you'll probably notice that I don't do in this episode or this channel, I don't do debunking videos of any kind, and I won't. I don't do debunking videos for the very simple reason that debunking videos, in my opinion, give crackpots the initiative. So if I were to sit down and watch a, I don't know, God forbid, a Robert Seffer video and debunk it, that gives like crackpot Jewish guy. Robert Seffer is Jewish, by the way, despite his protestations that he's not Ashkenazic because he claims that his grandfather is a Nazi or something. God, that guy is messed up. As one Jew to another, Robert, you sort yourself out. But I'm not going to do that because I think it gives crackpots the initiative, and I'd rather work as an educator and put good information out rather than debunk bad information. So yeah, I don't like the idea of debunking videos. Just not my thing. So I'd rather lead with good information, not spend time giving any of the air to crackpot people. All right. Dan, do you know what text he was familiar with? Maase Merkavah? Like what text? I mean, like, do you know what text he had access to? I'd be interested to see what he had access to, because that's just so little. I mean, I know that people knew that it existed, but the idea of actually having Merkavah texts, and also he may have been associated with Merkavah from Maimonides' weird interpretation of Masa Merkavah is basically just metaphysics. They're still metaphysics, but I'd be curious to know what exactly he had access to. Um, um, what are the most reliable sources, if any, for Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah? Well, Maaseh Merkavah, those texts are basically all gathered up in the Davila text. So those are all all the Merkavah mysticism are in the Davila text. There really aren't any texts for Maaseh Bereshit. In fact, I would say that the main text of Maaseh Bereshit is Sefer Yetzirah. If you really want to get into Maaseh Bereshit, really, I think the text you're probably going to want is Sefer Yetzirah. And if you can get a copy of it, I would get a copy of the Sefer Yetzirah Hashalem, which contains all of the major commentaries, like the major 10th century commentaries. So I think that's going to be your best bet for those texts. Yeah, to drive this point home, Andrew is absolutely right that if you really want access to more contemporary stuff like Rudolf Steiner and contemporary people, absolutely go to Angela's Symposium. She does that stuff far better than me. She focuses much more on contemporary stuff than I do, and can't recommend her channel enough. She's a dear friend, an excellent scholar, and so if you really want access to more contemporary stuff, definitely go check out Angela's Symposium. That's absolutely where you want to be for that material. Yeah, Schweppes, such a great podcast. No, I'm sure there's tons of folks of fans of Earl Fontenelle here. I've never talked to Earl. I respect his work immensely, and Schweppes is great for what it does. But I've never talked to him. I'd love to talk to him at some point. Maybe I'll meet him at some point at a conference or something. But I don't know. Maybe I'd be on Schweppes for like some John Dee stuff. I wrote my master's thesis on John Dee's Monas Hieroglyphica, so that's a text I know pretty well. So yeah, totally up to him. I'd love to be on the show. Schweppes is an absolutely amazing piece of online scholarly literature. But yeah, I'm not sure that to my knowledge, we've never been introduced. But that would be great. He's a great guy. Yeah, I mean, I know some people think of it sort of like you said, as a pity that I don't look at 20th century stuff. Um, I'm gonna go out again. I'm gonna esoteric canceled. I just don't find every time I go look at 20th century stuff, I am just deeply, I'm intellectually disappointed. And part of what makes me sad is that, when I say intellectually disappointed, I'm disappointed in the people writing. Like when I read someone like Ficino or Pico or Agrippa. Agrippa's a great example of this. D, whoever, but Agrippa is really, I think, one of the great examples of this. Pico too, even though the fact he was so young. They have such a command of theology, of philosophy, and of textual traditions that they can speak. They're like a symphony conductor. They can like conduct a symphony. And I mean, Agrippa is just basically a giant collection of quotations with some Agrippa thrown in there. I mean, he just quotes constantly classical sources. And what's so amazing to me about people like Pico or Ficino or Agrippa is their extraordinary command of even like bleeding edge of philosophy and science and mathematics. And you know, Pico's like talking about formal mathematics and the thesis. He's on the bleeding edge of where science and literature and philosophy and theology and all that is. The 20th century people that I've read, 20th century occult people that I've read, they haven't read Heidegger. They don't seem to have a grasp on phenomenology. They're not really they're not really up on science. They're not really up on mathematics. I just look at that when I read through them. I read through Blavatsky and stuff, or read through the little I've read through with Gurdjieff or whatever, Crowley. They're 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 150 years behind where things are. I mean, even someone who would be sympathetic to them, like Bergson. Bergson is like really close kindred spirits to what's going on in that world. And what I find just disappointing is that they're just completely pale in comparison in terms of their intellectual rigor and their intellectual knowledge of philosophy and theology compared to Renaissance people, compared to other medieval people. And to me, that's just like an instant turnoff. They're 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 just not intellectually interesting to me. So that's part of the reason why the 20th century just kind of turns me off when it comes to this material. Is I just want them to know a lot more than they do. And it's not that Crowley couldn't have read Being in Time. He could have read Being in Time. He could have read Ideas 1 and 2 by Husserl. He could have been on the Vienna Circle. Those texts are not impossible to understand. Crowley was a titanic intellect. But the fact that he doesn't know them at all, it's just disappointing. And to me, what I admire in the esoteric literature from the Middle Ages, from the Renaissance, from the ancient world, Iamblichus, I mean, that guy's on his P's and Q's when it comes to everything. Zosimus, it's amazing how much he's on the bleeding edge of where philosophy and science and literature is. 20th century people are not that. 20th century occult people are not that. So I find it just to be really disappointing intellectually. And as a philosophy person, my background's in philosophy, that intellectual disappointment, I can't get over it. I just can't get over it. So can you discuss the rabbis more in a video, please? Any thoughts on the theory that it's possibly indicates medieval explorations of transgender identity? Like in the Zohar, you mean? Or like sort of like, there's a great reader out sort of queering medieval scholarship and stuff like that. Maybe, I mean, gender in Kabbalah has got a lot of attention, and maybe I could do something on that. But yeah, it's definitely a great topic. Not a topic I know a ton about. But it'd be interesting to think about sort of how gender is functioning in Kabbalistic thinking in the Middle Ages, because clearly it's functioning in a very, very idiosyncratic way, and to what degree that's an expression of innovations in gender theory among the rabbis of the development of the Kabbalah. It's a great question. And there's a lot written on that. I have not read it, but there's a lot written on that. All right. Let's see here. Let me scroll down. Abulafia Menachem Rekananti. Rekananti is such a boss. It's like, if you don't like Menachem Rekananti, is like his commentary on the Torah is maybe one of the most important pieces of Kabbalah never translated English. It is absolutely incredibly good. It's a pity you can only read it in Hebrew, but his commentary, and it has Latin. His commentary on the Torah, his Kabbalistic commentary, it's just so clear, so systematic, so good. Stuff is absolutely fantastic. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Dan. That makes sense. It's the weird Rambam strikes again. All right. Do you have any Asatru or Germanic pagan path recommendations? I don't. It's like a 20th century reconstructionist paganism. I absolutely think that Angela is going to be your best bet for that stuff, or Angela, or maybe Jackson Crawford when they know some of that stuff a little bit, but I don't for sure. Raymond Todd, thank you so much for the super sticker. Appreciate the very considerable donation to the channel. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Let's do some show and tell. How about that? Does that sound good to folks? I'll show you a book I got from a neat book that I got from the Antiquarian Book Fair in New York when I was there just a month or so ago. These old books all look kind of the same with their nice little pigskin binding. But this book is the complete works of von Helmont, the elder, not the younger, not Mercurius, but his father. This is the Ortus Medicinae, the complete works of medicine. What's really cool about this book is that von Helmont is at the bleeding edge between chemistry and alchemy. He's at the very, very edge of it. And what's neat about his alchemy is he's sort of a post-Paracelsian. He's one of these mini post-Paracelsians. What's also cool about this book is it was definitely owned by a practicing alchemist. You can probably see, I don't know how close I can get it to the camera before it blurs out, but you can see in the notes, there's tons and tons of marginalia in this book from this alchemist. And part of what he does is that he goes through the annotator. Here's a great précis at the end of the book in the annotator's hand, where he goes through and annotates all the important things. He goes through von Helmont's works, and he goes through and he translates out all of the Paracelsian jargon, which if you've ever studied Paracelsus, one of the things that can make you crazy about dealing with Paracelsus is all the Paracelsian jargon. One of the really cool things about this book, however, maybe the coolest thing about this book, aside from the fact that it's an actual book of alchemy, annotated by an actual alchemist who was sort of translating out all the Paracelsian stuff, is that on page 577, if my memory serves me, and it does. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you guys this, but in page 577, von Helmont pioneers a very important word in the history of alchemy and chemistry. Let me find it. You probably can't see it. If I get it close enough, maybe you can. But kind of where my thumb is, or my finger is the word gas for the first time in any language. This is the book where the word gas comes from. G-A-S. It actually comes from the Greek word for chaos. What's interesting about his mention of gas there on page 577 is that he mentions that he's discovered a new kind of gas he calls it Spiritus Sylvester spirit. And he says that it emerges from things putrefying, specifically the putrefaction of bread and beer. And what he notices is, in the text, is that this gas, right, it causes candles to go out. What he's discovered is carbon dioxide. And this is an incredibly important point. And here's the page on which it happens. This is an incredibly important point in the history of the development of chemistry, kind of as chemistry is leaving alchemy, because he realizes definitively, experimentally, that Aristotle's theory of the four elements has to be, at least at some level, wrong, because not all air, earth, air, fire, and water, are homogeneous. We knew that from Earth, but he shows that there are gases that are flammable and there are gases that are inflammable. And one of the gases that he discovers, the gas that he does discover, and he publishes in his book, is carbon dioxide, and it puts fires out. So This is the first time in an alchemical textbook where the word gas appears. And the first time that it's used is to describe the discovery of carbon dioxide. So this is a cool book in lots of ways. Um, like I said, one, because it's sort of at the very, very edge of where alchemy is becoming chemistry. It's also really cool because it's been heavily, heavily annotated by a practicing alchemist, um, who was happy to write notes in both Latin and Greek. So you can see some of the notes here at the bottom of the text, right? And so it's cool because it's right on the edge of alchemy and chemistry. The first mention of the word gas ever. It's invented by von Helmont, and it's the first time carbon dioxide is noticed as a gas, distinct from air more generally, and that air being shown to be false. That Aristotle is definitely wrong about that. So it's a hugely important work in the history of philosophy. I'll do a whole episode about von Helmont at some point in the future as an alchemist. But anyway, von Helmont was also interested in finding the alkahest, the universal solvent, and all kinds of other alchemy-related things. He was knee-deep in the alchemical world. But again, it shows you this interesting transition between alchemy and chemistry. But again, a little bit of esoterica show and tell. The first appearance of the word gas in the chemical lexicon of so all right, let me take a couple more questions. Oh wow, it's already 3:43. Yeah, I just have a time for a couple more questions. Make sure to get these super chats. What book should an aspiring mystic begin with? Also, what are your thoughts on the tarot? I don't have many thoughts on the tarot, not many at all, actually. Aspiring mystic, I guess it depends on if you want to study mysticism or be a mystic, but I don't think you're going to become a mystic by reading books, just honestly. And I would say that if you want to read books of mystic literature, there's a great collection of what are called the classics of Western spirituality that are just an entire shelf of books of famous mystics, Western mystics at least, some Eastern mystics as well. But I would start with any one of those. I would pick I think my favorite Christian mystic's probably Heidegger. So she's a great mystic for that kind of thing. So I would start there maybe. All right. All right. Thank you for the super sticker, Plastic Bubble. Thank you for the super sticker. All right, let me just grab one or two more questions. Sorry, folks, I'm running out of time. Man, an hour and 42 minutes really went by fast. That's because you guys are such cool people. And okay, you meant the alchemical hermaphrodite rabies. Okay, yeah, let's check that out. Great correction. Thank you. Thank you for that correction. All right, folks. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions. Let me make sure this none I skipped for the super chats. Yes, Yusuf. The book is as old as air. Not the Aether. The Aether is something different. The Aether is something different. All right. All right, folks. Well, I think I'm going to call it just because I got things I got to do and I got to go run an errand. Speaking of this Absinthe project, I have to go run an errand. More about the Absinthe project coming in the future. Trust me on that. Maybe even an official announcement. All right, folks. Well, again, I just want to say as I wrap up this live stream, thank you guys. Thank you, all of you. You make this channel possible. You make it so I get a fair wage teaching for the first time in my life. You make it so that I look forward to my job. I get to hang out with amazing people like y'all, and I get to field some questions and hang out and just meet such interesting and wonderful people. So let me just say again, thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for buying silly merch, for super chats and super stickers, and supporting this work on Patreon, making all this possible. It means a ton to me. I don't take it for granted in the least. I am blessed, frankly, to have the job that I do the work that I do, and you guys make it worth it. Every time that I get a video out, do a live stream, you guys make it all worth it. So um, I absolutely appreciate everything that you guys do to make this channel possible. And I absolutely am thrilled to be able to do this work with and for you guys, for everyone here. So thank you so much. Yep, I'm gonna go run some errands and get some things done. But aside from that, I hope all of you have an absolutely wonderful weekend. And yeah, if you observe the Shabbat, the Sabbath, I hope you have a wonderful rest. And if you don't, I hope you get some rest just the same. But aside from that, thank you again. And I'll see you guys next week for some content on demonology and Johann Weyer and all of that. So absolutely fun Esoterica content to come. So again, thank you guys. Have a great Shabbos or great rest. Have a great weekend. And again, my deep and sincere thanks for making this possible. Thank you. See you guys soon.